The scream that tore through the Abiquiu boarding house at 3 in the morning brought half the residents stumbling into the hallway, but it was the cowboy who reached her door first. Xander Callahan had been sleeping light ever since he had arrived in this high desert town in northern New Mexico territory back in October of 1885, and something about the raw terror in that sound made his blood run cold. He stood outside the locked door, breathing hard, listening to the woman inside sob and gasp for air like she was drowning. "Madam," his voice was rough from sleep but gentle. "Madam, are you hurt?" The sobbing stopped abruptly. He could hear her moving around, furniture scraping against the wooden floor. "Go away," she finally said, and her voice shook so badly he could barely make out the words. "Just need to know you are all right." "I am fine. Please leave." But she did not sound fine. She sounded like someone barely holding herself together with spit and determination. Xander looked at the other residents who had gathered, their faces curious and annoyed in equal measure. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the boarding house, waved them all back to their rooms with a stern expression that brooked no argument. "That is Miss Amelia," she told Xander quietly once the others had shuffled away. "Priscilla Amelia. She has been with us for 2 months now. Gets the nightmares something terrible, but she will not talk about it. Pays her rent on time and keeps to herself." "What happened to her?" Mrs. Henderson shook her head. "Not my story to tell, even if I knew it, which I do not. Now you best get back to bed, Mr. Callahan. She will not thank you for the attention." But Xander could not shake the sound of that scream. He went back to his room on the floor below, but sleep would not come. He had drifted into this town 3 months ago, running from his own ghosts, taking work where he could find it at the various ranches that dotted the landscape between Abiquiu and the surrounding settlements. The pay was decent. The work kept his hands busy and his mind occupied, and nobody asked too many questions about where a man came from or why he chose to spend his nights in a boarding house instead of the bunkhouse with the other ranch hands. Come morning, he saw her for the first time. Priscilla Amelia was younger than he had expected, maybe 23 or 24, with dark blonde hair she wore in a simple bun and eyes the color of the Rio Chama on a cloudy day. She moved through the dining room like a ghost, taking her breakfast to the corner table farthest from the door, and he noticed how she positioned her chair so her back was never to the entrance. She ate quickly, efficiently, without pleasure, and kept her gaze down the whole time. When she rose to leave, Xander found himself standing. "Miss Amelia," she froze, and the look she gave him was pure wariness. Up close, he could see the shadows under those gray eyes, the pallor of her skin, the way her hands trembled slightly before she clasped them together. "Yes. I am Xander Callahan. I am in the room below yours. I heard you last night. Just wanted to make sure you were all right." "I am perfectly well, Mr. Callahan. Thank you for your concern." The words were polite but delivered like a barrier, a wall she was building between them with nothing but her tone. "If you ever need anything, I will not. Good day." She moved past him with the careful precision of someone navigating a minefield, and he watched her go with a strange ache in his chest. Mrs. Henderson appeared at his elbow. "Told you she would not thank you." "What happened to her?" Xander asked again. The older woman sighed. "All I know is she came here from Santa Fe. Got off the stage looking like death itself was chasing her. Paid me for 3 months in advance and asked for the room at the end of the hall, the one with the good lock. She works at the general store now, keeps the books for Mr. Patterson. He says she is smart as a whip with numbers, never makes mistakes." Over the following weeks, Xander found himself watching for Priscilla without quite meaning to. He learned her routines, the careful way she structured her days. She left for the general store at 8 each morning, came back at 6 each evening, took her supper in her room, and never spoke to anyone unless absolutely necessary. And every few nights, the screams would come, that sound of absolute terror that made something protective and fierce rear up in his chest. He started sleeping in the hallway. Not obviously, not where she would see him when she left her room in the morning, but at the top of the stairs, his bedroll laid out on the hard wooden floor, his gun within easy reach. Mrs. Henderson found him there after the 4th night and gave him a long, measuring look. "You know she will not like this if she finds out. I know. You getting sweet on her." Xander thought about that. "I do not know her well enough to be sweet on her, but nobody should have to be that scared, not if I can do something about it. And what exactly do you think you are doing, sleeping in a hallway like some kind of guard dog? Whatever I have to." Mrs. Henderson made a noise that might have been approval or exasperation. He could not tell which. "Well, at least have some coffee before you head out to the ranch, and take one of those spare blankets from the linen closet. Getting cold at night now. We will have snow before long." She was right about that. November brought the first frost, turning the high desert landscape into something crystalline and strange in the early mornings. December brought snow, those fat flakes that fell straight down in the still air and muffled everything in white silence. And still Xander slept outside Priscilla's room, night after night, while winter settled over Abaque like a held breath. He did not know when she figured it out. Maybe she saw him one morning when she left earlier than usual. Maybe Mrs. Henderson told her. Maybe she just sensed it somehow, the way a hunted animal senses the presence of something else in its territory. But one evening in mid-December, when he was laying out his bedroll at the top of the stairs, her door opened. Priscilla stood in the doorway in a simple blue dress, her hair down around her shoulders for once, and she looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. "Why are you doing this?" Xander straightened slowly, hat in his hands. "Doing what, madam?" "Do not play stupid with me, Mr. Callahan. Mrs. Henderson told me you have been sleeping out here for weeks." "Why?" He met her eyes, those stormy gray eyes that held too much pain for someone so young. "Because you are scared. And I figure maybe you will be less scared if someone is keeping watch. You do not even know me. That does not matter much." She stared at him for a long moment, and he saw her throat work as she swallowed. "You cannot sleep out here all winter. You will freeze." "I have slept in worse places. Why do you care?" That was the question, was it not? Xander turned his hat in his hands, searching for words that would not scare her away. "I had a sister once, Sarah. She got hurt by a man who was supposed to protect her. By the time I found out, by the time I got back to our ranch in Colorado, she had already left. Nobody knows where she went. That was 5 years ago, and I have been looking for her ever since." He took a breath. "I keep thinking maybe someone somewhere is looking out for her the way I cannot. So I figure I ought to do the same when I get the chance." Priscilla's face had gone very still. "What happened to the man who hurt her?" "He died." Xander said it flatly, without emotion, because some things did not need explaining. She nodded slowly, like he had just confirmed something she already knew. "I am not your sister, Mr. Callahan. I know that, and I do not need saving. I am not trying to save you, I am just trying to make it so you can sleep without screaming." Something flickered across her face, quick as lightning. "Is it working?" "I do not know. Is it?" She looked away, out the window at the end of the hall where snow was falling in the darkness. "I do not know either, but I still push a chair against my door every night. What are you scared of?" "Everything," she whispered. Then she stepped back into her room and closed the door, and he heard the scrape of wood on wood as she wedged that chair under the handle. But the next night, she left him a pillow outside her door. The night after that, a thicker blanket. Xander did not say anything about it, Just used them and tried not to think too hard about what it meant that she was thinking about his comfort. Christmas came and went quietly. Mrs. Henderson put up a small pine tree in the parlor and made a special dinner, but Priscilla took her meal in her room as always. Xander spent the day working at the ranch, helping to check on cattle in the snow, and came back to the boarding house after dark with his hands numb and his face raw from the cold. He found a package outside his door, wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. Inside was a knitted scarf, deep blue wool, and a note in careful handwriting. "Thank you for keeping the monsters away. P.A." He wore that scarf every day after that. The real breakthrough came in January during the worst storm of the winter. The snow had been falling for 2 days straight, and Xander had not been able to get out to the ranch. He was stuck at the boarding house with everyone else, reading an old newspaper in the parlor, when he heard footsteps on the stairs. Priscilla appeared, looking pale and drawn, and made her way to the kitchen. He followed her without quite knowing why. She was standing at the window, looking out at the wall of white that obscured everything beyond the glass. Her arms were wrapped around herself, and she was shaking. "Miss Amelia," she did not turn around. "I hate being trapped. I hate not being able to see what is coming." Xander moved closer, careful not to startle her. "Nothing is coming. It is just snow." "You do not know that. You cannot know that." Her voice cracked. "He could be out there right now, waiting for the storm to pass, and I would never know until it was too late." "Who?" She laughed, a bitter sound. "My husband. Late husband, I should say, though sometimes I wonder if he is really dead or if that is just what they told me so I would stop screaming." Xander felt his blood go cold. "Tell me." And maybe it was the storm, or the fact that they had been trapped in this strange ritual of protection for months now, or maybe she was just finally tired of carrying it alone. But Priscilla started talking. Her name had been Priscilla Amelia Ashford before she married. She had grown up in Santa Fe, the daughter of a banker, and at 21 she had married Thomas Ashford, a merchant who seemed charming and successful. For the first few months, everything had been fine. Then he started drinking. Then he started getting angry. Then he started using his fists. "I tried to leave," she said, her voice hollow. "Twice. The first time he found me at my parents' house and convinced them he was sorry, that it would never happen again. They believed him. Or maybe they just did not want to deal with a divorced daughter. The second time, he caught me before I even got out of Santa Fe. He locked me in our bedroom for a week. No food. No water except what he decided to bring me. Just darkness and waiting for him to come back and hurt me again." Xander's hands had clenched into fists. He forced them to relax. "How did you get away?" He fell down the stairs. Drunk, middle of the night, broke his neck. Priscilla finally turned to look at him, and her eyes were haunted. "The marshal ruled it an accident. My parents wanted me to stay in Santa Fe, play the grieving widow, eventually remarry someone else they picked out. But I knew I would die if I stayed there. So I took what money I had hidden away and I left. I came here because nobody knows me in Abiquiu. Because I thought maybe I could finally sleep without wondering if tonight was the night he would kill me. But you still cannot sleep." "No, because every time I close my eyes, I am back in that room, in the dark, listening to his footsteps in the hall, wondering if this time he is going to do more than just hit me." She wrapped her arms tighter around herself. "So I push a chair against the door, and I try to stay awake as long as I can. And I scream when the nightmares come anyway, because in my dreams he is not dead and he has found me and there is nowhere left to run." Xander did not think. He just moved forward and pulled her into his arms, and after a moment of rigid shock, she collapsed against him and sobbed. He held her while she cried. This woman he barely knew but had been protecting for months, and felt something shift in his chest. This was not about his sister anymore. This was about Priscilla herself, this brave, broken woman who had survived hell and was still fighting every single day just to exist. "He is dead," Xander said quietly into her hair. "He cannot hurt you anymore, I know. But knowing it and believing it are different things. Then I will believe it for you until you can believe it yourself." She pulled back to look at him, her face blotchy and wet with tears. "Why are you being so kind to me? Because you deserve kindness. Because you deserve to feel safe. Because somewhere along the way I started caring whether you are all right." He reached up and carefully brushed a tear from her cheek. "And because I think you are the bravest person I have ever met." "I am not brave. Brave people are not afraid. Brave people are afraid all the time. They just keep going anyway." Something in her expression softened. "You really believe that?" "I know it for a fact." The storm passed the next day and life in Abaku returned to its normal rhythms, but something had changed between them. Priscilla started taking her meals in the dining room instead of her room. She still sat in the corner with her back to the wall, but now she would look up when Xander came in and give him a small nod. Sometimes, if he was lucky, a small smile. He still slept outside her room. But now sometimes she would open the door in the evening and talk to him for a while before she went to bed. Small things at first, the weather, something funny that had happened at the store, a book she was reading. Gradually, though, the conversations deepened. She told him about her childhood in Santa Fe, about how much she had loved learning mathematics from her father, about the dreams she had once had of maybe teaching school someday. He told her about growing up on a ranch in Colorado, about how much he missed his sister, about the guilt he carried for not being there when she needed him most. "It was not your fault," Priscilla said one evening in early February. "You cannot protect everyone all the time." "I could have protected her. Maybe, or maybe she needed to save herself the way I did." Xander looked at her, this woman who was slowly becoming more than just someone he was protecting. "Is that what you did? Saved yourself?" "I am still trying to figure that out. But I think maybe I am starting to." Winter began to loosen its grip as February turned to March. The snow melted, revealing the brown earth beneath, and the cottonwood trees along the river started to show the first hints of green. Xander noticed that Priscilla's nightmares were coming less frequently now. Some nights she slept through until morning without a sound. Other nights he would hear her cry out, but the screams were shorter, quieter, like she was learning how to pull herself out of the darkness faster. And somewhere in those cold months, somewhere between the watching and the waiting and the slow build of trust, Xander fell in love with her. It was not a sudden thing. It was gradual, like the turning of the seasons. It was in the way she tilted her head when she was thinking hard about something. The way she smiled when Mrs. Henderson told a particularly terrible joke at supper. The quiet strength in her voice when she talked about her plans for the future, about maybe saving enough money to open her own bookkeeping business someday. The way she had started to look at him like he was someone valuable, someone worth knowing. He did not tell her. How could he? She was still healing, still learning how to exist in the world without fear as her constant companion. The last thing she needed was some cowboy complicating things with feelings she might not be ready for. But then came the night in late March when he woke to the sound of her door opening. He sat up fast, hand going to his gun, and found her standing there in her nightgown and a shawl, looking down at him with an expression he could not read. "Priscilla, what is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong, I just—" She twisted her hands in her shawl. "I realized tonight that I did not have a nightmare. I slept through the whole night for the first time in 2 years, and when I woke up, the first thing I thought was that I wanted to tell you." Xander got to his feet, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. "That is wonderful. It is because of you. Because you have been out here night after night, keeping me safe even when I did not ask you to, even when I was rude to you, even when it was freezing cold and you could have been comfortable in your own bed. I wanted to do it. Why? She stepped closer, and in the dim light from the window he could see that her eyes were bright. And do not tell me it is because of your sister. This stopped being about her months ago. He could lie. He could deflect. But he had never been good at either of those things, and he did not want to start now, not with her. Because I care about you. Because somewhere along the way, making sure you were safe became the most important part of my day. Because He stopped, swallowed hard. Because I fell in love with you, Priscilla. And I know that is probably the last thing you want to hear, and I am not asking you for anything. But you asked why, and that is why. She stared at him for a long moment, and he could not breathe, could not think, could only wait for her to tell him he had ruined everything. I think I might be falling in love with you too, she whispered, and that terrifies me more than any nightmare. Why? Because the last time I loved someone, he hurt me. Because I do not know if I can trust my own judgment anymore. Because what if I am wrong about you? What if you are just better at hiding the monster? Xander wanted to reach for her but kept his hands at his sides. I cannot prove to you that I am not a monster. I can only tell you that I would rather cut off my own hand than raise it to you. And I can wait as long as you need me to wait until you believe that. What if I never believe it? Then I will spend the rest of my life showing you it is true. Priscilla made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. That is possibly the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. I mean it. I know you do. That is what scares me. She looked down at her hands, then back up at him. But I am tired of being scared. I am tired of letting what he did to me control every part of my life. So I am going to do something very brave and very stupid. What is that? She stepped forward and kissed him. It was soft and tentative and over almost before it began, but Xander felt it all the way down to his bones. When she pulled back, her cheeks were flushed and her eyes were wide. Was that all right? She asked. That was more than all right. He wanted to pull her back, kiss her properly, but he forced himself to stay still. But only if it was what you wanted. It was. I am just not sure what to do now. Now you go back to bed, and tomorrow we will figure out what comes next, together. She nodded slowly, then reached out and took his hand, just for a moment, just long enough for him to feel the warmth of her palm against his. Thank you, Xander, for everything. Any time. He watched her go back into her room, but for the first time in months, she did not wedge the chair under the door handle. She left it open, just a crack, like she was finally ready to trust that the monsters were not coming for her anymore. Xander lay back down on his bedroll with a smile on his face and did not sleep for hours, too full of hope and wonder to do anything but stare at the ceiling and think about the way her lips had felt against his. Courting Priscilla was different than anything Xander had ever experienced. She was skittish as a wild horse, ready to bolt at any sudden movement. But she was also determined to not let her fear win, which meant she pushed herself to do things that clearly terrified her. Walking through town with him in broad daylight, letting him sit next to her at supper, holding his hand when they walked along the river on Sunday afternoons. He learned her boundaries through trial and error. She did not like being surprised from behind. She needed space when she started to look overwhelmed. She could not stand raised voices, even in jest. But she loved when he read to her in the evenings, his voice low and steady. She loved when he brought her wildflowers from the fields outside town. She loved when he told her stories about the ranch, about the horses and the cattle and the endless sky. I never thought I would feel this way about someone again, she told him one evening in April. They were sitting on the porch of the boarding house, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and red. I thought that part of me died when Thomas locked me in that room, but it did not. No. It was just sleeping, waiting for someone safe to wake it up. She leaned her head against his shoulder. You make me feel safe, Xander. You make me feel like maybe I can have the life I always wanted. What life is that? One where I am not afraid. One where I can love someone without wondering if they are going to hurt me. One where I can sleep through the night without nightmares. She looked up at him. One with you in it. He kissed her then, properly this time, and felt her melt against him. When they broke apart, she was smiling. I think I am ready to stop sleeping with the chair by the door, she said. Are you sure? No, but I want to try. That night, Xander slept in his own room for the first time in months. He lay awake for hours, listening for her scream, ready to run upstairs at the first sound of distress. But it never came. In the morning, he found her in the dining room eating breakfast with a peaceful expression on her face. I slept all night, she told him. No nightmares, no chair, just sleep. I am proud of you. I am proud of me too. Spring unfurled across Abiquiu in shades of green and gold. The cottonwoods leafed out, the wildflowers bloomed, and Priscilla bloomed with them. She laughed more. She started wearing her hair down sometimes. She began talking about the future with a certainty that made Xander's heart swell. In May, he asked her to marry him. They were out by the river, sitting on a blanket in the shade, and he was so nervous he nearly dropped the ring. I know this is fast, he said, and I know you have every reason to be cautious, but I love you, Priscilla. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone, and I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy if you will let me. She looked at the ring, a simple silver band with a small turquoise stone, and her eyes filled with tears. I never thought I would get married again. I never thought I would want to. His heart sank. I understand if you cannot. I want to, she interrupted. I want to marry you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep next to you every night. I want to build a life with you. I want all of it, Xander. And that scares me and thrills me in equal measure, but mostly it just makes me happy. Is that a yes? That is the biggest yes I have ever given to anything in my entire life. They were married in June, a small ceremony in the church with Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Patterson from the general store as witnesses. Priscilla wore a simple white dress and carried wildflowers, and Xander thought she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, and Xander kissed her, she kissed him back with no fear, no hesitation, just love. They moved into a small house on the edge of town, a 2-room adobe with a garden plot and a view of the mountains. Xander took a permanent job as foreman at the largest ranch in the area, and Priscilla opened her bookkeeping business just like she had planned. Life settled into something peaceful, something good, something neither of them had quite believed they deserved. There were still hard days. Sometimes Priscilla would wake in the night, gasping, reaching for the chair that was no longer there. But Xander was always there to hold her, to remind her she was safe, to whisper that the monsters were gone and they were never coming back. And gradually, over months and then years, the nightmares faded to rare occurrences, then to nothing at all. In the spring of 1887, Priscilla told him she was pregnant. They stood in their kitchen, her hand pressed to her still flat belly, and Xander felt tears burn his eyes. Are you happy? She asked, suddenly uncertain. I am happier than I have ever been in my entire life. I am scared, she admitted. What if I am a terrible mother? What if I am too damaged to do this right? He pulled her close. You are the strongest person I know. You survived hell and came out the other side. You are going to be an amazing mother. Their son was born in December, a squalling, red-faced baby boy they named Samuel after Xander's father. Priscilla took to motherhood with the same fierce determination she brought to everything else, learning as she went, asking for help when she needed it. Xander watched her cradle their son and felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. Over the years, their family grew. A daughter named Rose came 2 years after Samuel, then another boy they called William. The little house became too small, so they built a bigger one with 5 bedrooms and a wide porch. Priscilla's bookkeeping business thrived, and she trained 2 young women in town to help her manage the workload. Xander worked his way up to part owner of the ranch, and his reputation as a fair and skilled cattleman spread throughout the territory. But the best part, the part that made everything else worthwhile, was coming home each evening to find Priscilla waiting for him. Sometimes she would be helping the children with their lessons. Sometimes she would be in the garden, pulling weeds and humming to herself. Sometimes she would just be sitting on the porch, watching the sunset, and when she saw him, she would smile that smile that still made his heart skip. They never forgot where they started. On cold winter nights, when the snow was falling and the wind howled around their warm house, Xander would sometimes think back to those months when he slept outside her door at the boarding house. When she was just a terrified woman and he was just a cowboy trying to help. When neither of them knew that they were building the foundation for something that would last a lifetime. "Do you ever regret it?" Priscilla asked him once, many years later. They were sitting on their porch, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Samuel had married a schoolteacher from Santa Fe and had 3 children of his own. Rose had surprised everyone by becoming a doctor, one of the first women in the territory to do so. William was working at the ranch with Xander, learning the business. "Regret what?" Xander asked. "All those nights you slept in the hallway, you could have just ignored me. You could have let me figure it out on my own." He took her hand, that familiar gesture that still felt as right as it had the first time. "I do not regret a single night, not one, because every single one of them led me here to this life with you, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat." She leaned her head on his shoulder, the same way she had all those years ago. "I love you, Xander Callahan. I loved you when I was too scared to admit it. I loved you when you slept outside my door all winter, and I will love you until the day I die." "That is good," he said, kissing the top of her head, "because I am not going anywhere." They sat there as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red and purple, while their grandchildren's laughter rang out across the land they had built together. Priscilla had not pushed a chair against a door in over 30 years. She had not woken screaming in over 20. The monsters that had once haunted her were nothing but distant memories, powerless in the face of the love and safety she had found. And Xander thought about his sister Sarah, wherever she was, and hoped that she had found someone to keep her monsters at bay too. That she had found her own peace, her own happiness, her own love story. Because everyone deserved that. Everyone deserved to feel safe. Everyone deserved to sleep through the night without fear. When full darkness fell, and the children had been called inside by their parents, Xander and Priscilla finally rose from the porch and went into their house. It was a routine they had followed for decades now, this transition from the day into the night. But it never got old. It never lost its sweetness. As they got ready for bed, Priscilla paused by the window, looking out at the stars that spangled the New Mexico sky. "Do you remember the first time I told you I loved you?" "Of course. It was in the hallway of the boarding house. You were standing there in your nightgown, looking terrified and brave at the same time. I had never been more scared in my life, not even when Thomas was at his worst. Because loving you meant trusting someone again. It meant making myself vulnerable. It meant believing that maybe, just maybe, not all men were monsters. And now," she turned to him with a smile, "now I know for certain that the best decision I ever made was letting you love me. And loving you back." They climbed into bed together, the same way they had thousands of nights before. Priscilla curled against Xander's side, her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. Outside, an owl hooted somewhere in the darkness. Inside, there was only warmth and safety and the steady beat of two hearts that had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances. "Good night, my love," Priscilla whispered. "Good night, my brave girl." She fell asleep within minutes, her breathing deep and even, no chair by the door to protect her because she did not need it anymore. She had something better. She had Xander, the cowboy who had slept outside her room all winter, who had loved her through her terror and her healing, who had shown her that it was possible to be afraid and still find the courage to love again. And as Xander drifted off to sleep himself, holding the woman who had become his whole world, he thought about how strange life could be. How sometimes the worst things led to the best things. How sometimes a scream in the night could be the beginning of forever. How sometimes all it took was one person willing to stand guard, to keep the monsters at bay, to believe in someone even when they could not believe in themselves. The winter that he had spent sleeping outside Priscilla's door had been the coldest and most uncomfortable of his life. But it had also been the most important, because it had taught him what love really meant. Not the easy, comfortable kind. The fierce, protective, patient kind. The kind that said, "I will wait as long as it takes." The kind that said, "You are worth fighting for." The kind that said, "I will keep you safe until you can keep yourself safe." And Priscilla had learned something too during those long months. She had learned that not all men were like Thomas, that some men kept their promises, that some men used their strength to protect rather than harm, that it was possible to trust again, to love again, to hope again, even after everything she had been through. Together, they had built something that neither of them could have built alone. A life, a family, a love story that had started with fear and ended with joy. And though the path had been hard, though there had been tears and nightmares and moments when Priscilla thought she would never be whole again, it had been worth it. Every single second had been worth it. Years turned to decades, and still they loved each other with the same fierce devotion that had brought them together. They grew old side by side, watching their children grow and have children of their own, watching Abiquiu change and modernize around them while their love remained constant. When Xander's hair turned gray, Priscilla still looked at him like he hung the moon. When Priscilla's hands became gnarled with age, Xander still held them like they were precious. On their 50th wedding anniversary, their entire family gathered at the house for a celebration. There were dozens of people now, children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, all of them connected by the love that Xander and Priscilla had built out of fear and hope and determination. They stood together on the porch, surrounded by the people they had created, and told the story one more time. "Your grandmother was too scared to sleep without a chair by the door," Xander said, his arm around Priscilla's shoulders. "So I slept outside her room all winter." "He kept me safe when I could not keep myself safe," Priscilla added. "He showed me what real love looked like, and because of that, all of you are here today." One of their great-granddaughters, a little girl of 6 with Priscilla's gray eyes, looked up at them with wonder. "Were you really that scared, great-grandma?" "I was, sweetheart. I was so scared I did not think I would ever feel normal again." "But you are not scared now, right?" Priscilla smiled and squeezed Xander's hand. "No, darling, I am not scared now. Because your great-grandfather taught me that I was stronger than my fear, and that some cowboys are heroes." The party went on late into the evening, filled with laughter and music and love. When everyone had finally gone home and the house was quiet again, Xander and Priscilla sat on their porch one more time, looking out at the land they had called home for half a century. "I have been thinking," Priscilla said. That is always dangerous, Xander teased gently. She swatted his arm, but she was smiling. I have been thinking about how different my life could have been, if I had stayed in Santa Fe, if I had let fear win, if you had not been sleeping light that night when I screamed. But you did not stay, and fear did not win, and I was there. Yes. You were there. You are always there. She turned to look at him, this man who had been her rock, her safety, her love for 50 years. Thank you, Xander, for everything, for sleeping outside my door, for being patient with me, for loving me when I did not know how to love myself. It has been my honor, he said simply. They sat together as the stars came out one by one, the same stars that had watched over them all those years ago when they were just beginning. And when they finally went inside, they went together, the way they had done everything for half a century. Hand in hand, heart to heart, two people who had found each other in the darkness and built a light that would shine for generations. The chair never went back by the door. Priscilla never needed it again, because she had something better than a chair to keep her safe. She had love, she had trust. She had Xander. And in the end, that made all the difference.